Thank you so much for joining, everyone. It's great to see so many people um, for this subject and generally. So we appreciate your time, and we're going to get started in just a moment, just as soon as everyone joins. Um, so thank you all for joining. My name is Hillel Assaf. I'm the Director of National Programs at the New Israel Fund. Um, I've been at the New Israel Fund for 8 years almost, mostly in Israel, and recently moved to the US about a year ago to do this role. So I want to thank you again, everyone, for joining us for this conversation, very timely and very important conversation. Um, and I want to frame it for a bit before we dig a bit deeper and hear from our uh, magnificent speakers. So, as you know, for many years, NAF has basically been the engine behind a wide range of efforts in the West Bank aimed at protecting human rights and advancing a future based on equality, security, and dignity for both Israelis and Palestinians. And we've done so through partnering with organizations. Many of you know of these organizations. They do legal advocacy, they've done public education, media engagement. They've been building coalitions for many, many years, organizing the grassroots level. Um, and in the last couple of years, we've also played a leading role in supporting and coordinating protective presence activists and the organizations behind them. As the situation on the ground gets worse and more dire, so does our commitment to them. And in fact, NAF's commitment to combating the occupation in the West Bank is the reason why I joined NAF so many years ago. And I think why so many of us care deeply about NAF and agree with its actions. Um, Relatedly, over the past several months, many of you have received updates from us about the increase in settler violence across the West Bank, an increase that we've been seeing for years. Today, we want to keep raising awareness to this issue and to make sure it doesn't get buried beneath the headlines. So we're going to be hearing from people who are actively living and combating this reality every day. Some of us, I'm sad to say, haven't been able to join us. But the speakers we have here are incredible, and I'm excited to get into the conversation with them. So, just to set the intention, today's conversation has three major goals. We want to understand what's happening on the ground at the moment. We want to see how people are responding together, and we want to explore what will it take to strengthen that response. What can we do as individuals, as a community, as the New Israel Fund to make a bigger impact? Um, our first guest was supposed to be Eid Hathaleen, who's an amazing artist, longtime activist, community leader. He's a friend to many. He's from the village of al-Khair, which is a Palestinian community that has faced escalating attacks in recent weeks, more and more so, and we're going to hear more about that. The situation at al-Khair is extremely challenging, and the attacks seem to be going on uninterrupted. We really hope to have him with us today live, but due to the realities on the ground, we just that wasn't possible. So my apologies to you, but I hope you understand that some of these things are unpredictable, and I hope he will find a way to join the call perhaps a bit later. But regardless, we're committed to raising his voice. Fortunately, a few weeks ago, we created a video featuring Eid, who was the speaker who can't make it. And we'd like to take 3 minutes of your time of this conversation to share the video before we continue the conversation. And after the video, our speakers, Maya, who was in Khair only a few days ago, will give us a short update on the situation on the ground. So we're going to play the video. I hope it's not too laggy, but it's really incredible video.
I am Eid Suleiman Hathaleen. I'm from the village of al-Khair, located in the southern part of the West Bank. I am a father and peaceful activist to try to document what's going on in the area. I would love to be with you, dear friends. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your efforts to show what's happening in the occupied territories to the world. Thank you. al-Khair is a community who suffer and pay a lot of price by staying in their land nearby the settlement Carmel, which built in the 80s, and then expand all over and surrounded our place, al-Khair, from all sides. We have subtle violence happened all these years from our neighbors. Sometimes you have 5 attacks in the same day. They shoot human beings, they shoot also animals, not accountable, not being investigated. And the idea just to expel us out of here and then expand Carmel more and more. In the last recent years, they used a new tactic of violence. They built inside the village itself. They built an outpost inside our community, and they opened roads in our community land, which are private ones. They try to make our life much harder in this community, and then people leave. Protective prison is the most important thing we achieve in Masafriyat and South Hebron Hills, and in al-Khair in specific. Protective prison is the key that helping families nowadays to stand and stay in their homes around the area of the occupied territories. Our friends, they do a lot of tremendous job with activists. I mean, it's a work of years of knowing each other. It's been like family members of us. And they do all this work together to sustainable the life of the simple Palestinian farmers who try to live in peace in their land and their place. When I saw activists quickly jumping to the scene of the attack or the action happened by settlers and the army, I feel safe a little bit. Even though the activists get a lot of attacks by settler movement and the army itself. I feel there is some safety here with these guys standing with their cameras and standing with the families, holding some people, holding some kids while their families attacked. The protective prison is very important key for resisting in a non-violent way. I rely on this, and a lot of communities and Palestinians rely on the activists and protective prison for the area. I'd like to ask my friends to help and push more to their politics levels and always remind them something wrong happened in the occupied territories in the Holy Land and should be fixed, should be ended. I wish for myself and for every human being who live in Israel and Palestine to live in peace and dignity and safety and recognize the other's rights to exist and live nearby each other as human beings, Palestinians and Israelis. I hope so. We achieve it one day.
That's a very strong video, I think, and the reality that reflects from it is, it's hard to find words to follow that. And I know we're all here sending our best regards to Eid and to his village. I want to turn to Maya, who will speak more in length soon. She's one of our speakers, one of our panelists, and she was in al-Khair over the weekend. Maya, can you please tell us what you've seen and maybe bring a bit of the voices of the village into this conversation?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Hillel. And thank you all for coming. It feels very meaningful to be here, experiencing what is going on, and coming back from al-Khair and having the opportunity to also talk to so many people about it. So thank you for joining this call. I wish Eid was here to tell you himself, and I'll repeat what Hillel said, and I think I encourage you to look for opportunities to hear Eid, if it's at webinars or when you visit the land. al-Khair, I'm guessing many of you heard the name before. It's a village. It's one of the most famous villages in the West Bank, especially because of the warm hospitality that activists are getting there for the last maybe 20 years. And also because of its proximity to the settlement of Carmel. Like you saw in the video, Carmel was established in the 80s, and it is built really on the last row of houses in al-Khair, and they are for the last 40 years struggling and standing despite the harassments and violence that the settlement and the army are enforcing. The last year was especially hard for al-Khair. A year and a half ago, an outpost started to be built in the middle of the village. I don't know if you saw in the videos, but we have like houses of families that on their windows and like right outside their bathrooms, a caravan was put, and just a month after they started with building the outpost, there was a horrific incident where one of the settlers that was working for the army and for the settlement was actually coming back from working in the outpost and shot one of the leaders of al-Khair, a dear friend of mine, Eid Hathaleen, a very close friend and a cousin of Eid, and so many people that know the village. Eid was killed just a year ago on July 28th, 2025. And next week, we're going to commemorate his death in a ceremony in the village. And it is, I mean, his loss, our loss, and his death is really something that impacted so many people. But I think what is like another layer that was really hard on everyone was the fact that the situation on the ground just got worse since. We're seeing an expansion of the outposts. So there are like probably 10 caravans that are being built in the middle of the village, blocking al-Khair residents from walking freely between their houses, harassing them when they're passing next to the road where was like an open space just like a year and a half ago. The outpost also blocked the kids' way to school, so kids are not able to walk to school anymore. They need to take a car and take like a bypass from a longer road. Just a week ago, settlers backed by soldiers stole the computer that is holding all the security cameras of the village, something that was like day and night watched by volunteers and was protecting the villagers. And just 2 weeks ago, I think 3 houses were demolished inside the village. So we're seeing in the last year an increase of what we used to call harassment, violence. It's really, when we say terror, it's not only like the physical violent acts that are in the extreme, kill people or injure them, but it is the daily life of just being afraid to walk outside of the door. And we're seeing a really a sharp increase in that. I can maybe say
What
more
are maybe you
after.
can
Yeah.
say what, just to lay the land, what are the settlers who come into the village? What are they looking for? Why do they go looking for trouble there?
So the families that are coming from Carmel is known to be a settlement that is kind of more bourgeoisie and not like the outpost, like not hilltop youth, and more like family oriented. And the outpost itself is also kind of was the narrative around the outpost was also built in that way. So we're seeing families coming to the outpost from the settlement, crossing with kids, with babies. al-Khair is also it's known for a very like peaceful village. They really, the settlers there feel very confident in walking around in the middle of the village. So they're not looking for like not looking for trouble, but they know that their presence there is making the life unbearable. And they're very slowly expanding the area where the outpost is, really like pushing the fence like literally to the bathroom of the family, blocking doors. And maybe they're waiting for like something to an excuse for them to act violently and just like demolish the houses there, or come and arrest dozens of men in one night because of an excuse that they're looking for, an opportunity they're looking for. But I think they know that they have like the army and the government are backing them, and they have time, and they can work slowly, and they're building more and more houses, they're building more and more families, and in the end they're hoping that people will just leave. al-Khair residents are not, they're not going to leave. This is not their plan, and it's not going to work in the near future. But if things will look the way they do right now for many more months and many more years, it's unbearable. Like I was just there on Saturday, like no one is sleeping at night. Like no one in the village is can close their eyes and sleep. It's like mentally draining, and it's not sustainable. And they know it. The settlers know it. It's just a matter of time.
Thank you, Maya. That was what I was aiming for, was to really. The point is that al-Khair is one village, but it represents something that we're seeing all over the place. The conflict between these outposts and Palestinian communities living outside in their villages has just reached a boiling point. And I think I want to thank you for bringing the voice of al-Khair, and I encourage all of us to keep our eyes on the developments from there. And I want to move to Sarit, who is the director of the HQ for Combating Settler Violence, which is a coalition convened by NIF that coordinates different organizations who do the work to document it, to respond, to prevent as best as they can settler violence across the West Bank. And Sarit is a well-accomplished, activist and director of. She worked in B'Tselem for years, very active in Israel's anti-occupation movement. So thank you for joining us, Sarit. And what I would want you to do is maybe take the example of al-Khair and kind of stretch it out onto what is happening at the West Bank, at large, in the West Bank at large.
Yeah. So thank you, Hillel. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It's really encouraging to see such a large number of participants in this meeting, and it really clarifies how important the issue is, how important people understand it to be. So I really want to thank you, and also tell you that we will have lots of information and other material available for you if you're interested in following up more. But I'll just say very briefly, just to continue from Maya's description of just the terrible, awful reality of the lives of the people of al-Khair, is that actually The unusual thing about al-Khair is that these people are still holding on tooth and nail to their homes and to their land, because so many other dozens of Palestinian herding and rural communities have been displaced by this exact settler tactic of building an outpost literally in the middle of a Palestinian community and using this outpost as a base camp for low-level harassment and for high-level and very intense violence against this community without any sort of restriction, without any sort of consequences or anyone protecting the Palestinians. And this has led, and I'll maybe post some links to more information over the last few years, to the wiping out of dozens of Palestinian communities literally off the face of the land. I'll put in links to the list, both by B'Tselem and by Peace Now and Kerem Navot, of those communities that have been displaced by this tactic. And this isn't something that has just been happening in the past and was ended or stopped. It's happening right now in dozens of communities throughout the West Bank. But additionally, aside from the rural communities that have been either displaced or are currently basically surrounded, fighting for their lives under this terrible, oppressive, horrific reality, we also have a relatively new development now throughout the West Bank, which is that settlers have been so emboldened by the support of all aspects or all branches of the Israeli government that they're simply expanding this tactic to established villages, large villages, and even small towns in the West Bank. So if I'm to quote something I heard, a very, very poignant thing I heard from a friend, he said that his friends used to be struggling for access to their land because the rural communities have been essentially over the last few years cut off from most of their agricultural land. But now people are struggling to simply stay in their own homes. And there is report after report from dozens of different locations throughout the West Bank of individual homes that are slightly possibly removed from larger villages, or of homes that are on the edges of villages that are being targeted by settlers, either through violence aimed at pushing these families out, making their lives simply unbearable and pushing them out to seek slightly more safety in a more populated, a slightly more central location, or to take over homes that are either unpopulated because they're only under construction or because they were abandoned. And you'll see that again and again in video and photographic evidence that is arriving, that we're kind of accessing from all parts of the West Bank, and we're actually trying to also publicize it with mainstream Israeli media. So maybe just to give a couple of pointers. So just to continue the understanding of how systematic and policy-based the reality we see is, I think it's fair to see it as the continuation, obviously, of long-term Israeli governmental policies that have been basically boosted, have been turbocharged by 4 years. We're almost reaching the end of 4 years of this current government, our most fanatical far-right government, and also 2 years of a Trump administration that is greenlighting pretty much anything that Israeli settlers and the Israeli, settler movement is doing throughout the West Bank. We're essentially watching the kind of, phase A of Smotrich's decisive plan. I don't know if you've read it, but I can put a link to it in English in the chat and send it to you. Basically, what is happening now is that Israel is investing huge resources and is enabling hundreds of outposts, farms, whatever you want to call them, and the expansion of settlements at a huge rate in order to just overwhelm Palestinians living in the West Bank, to make them reach a state of complete inability to resist in any way, resist as in think of a different option. Imagine independence, right? That's the idea, to totally overwhelm Palestinians, to make them realize essentially, according to Smotrich, who is one of the most powerful people in our government right now, and certainly when it comes to Palestinians, that there is just no option, that they should just give up. And then they could just either go or live under our boot, or, have to deal with this genocidal rhetoric that is being used again and again throughout by the Israeli far right against Palestinians in the West Bank right now. So I'll end here because I think that there's just so much to talk about, but I just want to really reiterate what we're seeing is not the actions of these 150 wayward youth like our Prime Minister Netanyahu has been saying. I mean, he upped the ante. He upped it from 70. So I think that's at least pushing towards, understanding that the previous description he gave was just completely absurd. But this is a government project, and that's how it needs to be understood and also dealt with.
Thank you, Sarit. That was very eye-opening, and I think you demonstrated how the story we heard from Eid and from Maya is represented throughout the whole West Bank, and it's not something sporadic. It is something that is being orchestrated on the ground level, but backed by the government. And I think also, as someone who was a soldier in the West Bank 10 years ago, I had very clear orders about what to do when you see some things like this. And I have a feeling that that has also changed, that the military and the police are turning a blind eye, to say the least. And this is something that's happening, as we said, throughout the West Bank. So thank you for bringing us that picture. And I want to turn now to people who are also aware of the reality on the ground. They experience it day to day. And they're even there physically, but they're there with a different mission. They're on the ground to combat all these terrible things we've heard, to stand in solidarity with Palestinians, and to, the reason that we're here today, to talk about how we can stop settler violence. So I'd like to bring Maya into the conversation and Roei into the conversation. These are two great activists who I had the honor of spending a week with in the United States. A month ago, we brought them to New York and Boston and Washington, D.C., for them to speak about their experiences doing protective presence. They're incredible people. Roei works in a place called Bnei Avraham, which is an NIF grantee. They do a lot of protective presence from a religious lens. Maya works for NIF, I should say, and has also been doing protective presence for the last 7 years. In South Hebron Hills, teaching, doing language courses in villages. And I want to hear your perspective on what's happening. I want you also to introduce yourself and tell us and the wonderful audience how you got involved in this work. What does this work actually look like? Roei, maybe we can start with you. Tell us about yourself and how you got into this work.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Big honor. My name is Roei Kleitman. I'm 33. I'm from Jerusalem, and I'm one of the leaders of an action group called Bnei Avraham. You can see I wear the shirt especially for you. It's in a font that is Hebrew Arabic combined. Maybe I'll start from the name, and I think it explains a lot about me and about our group. Bnei Avraham, the sons of Abraham. The starting point for us is theological. I came, and I'm still religious, from a religious Zionist home, which means many of those people who we are facing are actually our brothers and our cousins, or people we learned in our yeshiva or in the high school. And I think because of that, we feel even more guilt and responsibility to stop what's happening. I feel since the war broke up, two deep senses. One is loneliness, and the second one is urgency. I felt I'm very connected to my Jewish identity, and it started before the war, as Sarit explained, but I think that since the war broke up, we and I, as people who are really connected to their Judaism, felt more and more lonely. We felt we couldn't really speak out Judaism of life, of equality, of justice, of compassion, and that all the voices of the rabbis around us and the religious figures are calling to revenge in the name of religion, to supremacy, to violence, to extremism. And that's not the Torah I grew on. I feel on a daily basis there is a huge Hillel Hashem, disrespect of God and disrespect of the name of God. When people come out to villages with their tzitzit out and beat up Palestinians, I'm sure that's what God meant, and it makes me ashamed of me wearing my own tzitzit. And I feel I have to fix this image that the Palestinians have of Jews in their eyes, because all the Jews they see are super violent towards them, whether it's settlers or soldiers. So what we do in Bnei Abraham, we accompany. We all grew in religious homes. We look actually the same like the settlers, because we also have a beard. Now it's Shlosh Shavuot. We are not allowed to shave it. We have the kippah. We have the tzitzit. And at first, when we show up in the village, and that's a heartbreaking, sometimes the children might break into tears and cry because they are afraid of us, because they don't know people can look like me but come for their good. And through time, because we build long and deep relationship with the communities we work with, they learn that some people could be religious but come to be in solidarity with them. The main thing we do in the last months is we accompany, as Sarit says, now I agree it's not settler violence, it's state violence, but the pioneers are the settlers, and especially religious Zionist settlers, unfortunately. And so they now are going for the big villages and the farmers in order to disconnect the farmers from their land. And it works actually in two branches. The moment they use the violence to make the farmers don't come to their land, after amount of time, they officially declare their land as state land and then build a official settlement on top of their private land. So what we do, we come in large groups and accompany and march with the Palestinians. And it's an amazing march. We do it despite again. We don't give up. And it's a whole community thing that combines children and women and elders. And with all of them, we use our Jewish Israeli privileges, because we know that because we are there, they would less harm us, and walk with them to their land and try to work the land as much as we can. And then usually the settlers come and then the army come, but we don't give up. We come the next week and double our amount and do it again and again. And sometimes we have successes, and sometimes we don't. But I think for sure what we're doing is that we're bringing strong relationship. I believe it's a bell on the face of Judaism. I believe we are saving Judaism for all of us. I know most of you probably are not from Israel, but unfortunately it's not an Israeli thing, it's a Jewish thing. So we are in our legs, standing there for all of you people who care about Judaism or those values are important for them. And the second thing we do, we are doing Kiddush Hashem, we are fixing in the eyes of the Palestinian the image of what does it mean to be a Jew. And the children who grow in those villages, they know that in the other side, there are people who look at their height, see them as human beings and care them, and would even take the chance to stand there with them in their troubles.
Thank you, Roei. That's an incredible overview of what protective presence actually means when we talk about it. It's not only being there, but accompanying the shepherds, helping them get to their lands, but also dehumanizing Palestinians and Israelis, and building something joined together, standing together in solidarity against what we are hearing. And I think I want to bring Maya back into the conversation. Maya is a seasoned protective presence activist, right? You've been doing this for 7 years. And you're also doing it with NAF, coordinating our protective presence assistance. And I want you maybe also to share from your perspective, what does protective presence, maybe you can share a story of what a day of protective presence looks like, talking about the relationships you've been building with Palestinians, maybe how things have been changing.
Mhm. Okay, so I didn't introduce myself earlier. I live in Haifa. I work in NIF. Like Hillel said, I'm coordinating a program that supports protective presence activists. And I was born in a village called Neve Shalom. It's a joint Israeli-Palestinian village. And this is relevant because I speak Arabic from all my life. And 7 years ago, me and a friend, we wanted to open a course for Israeli activists, an Arabic course that combines studies and with like in a local community, immersive studies and protective presence. We didn't call the name protective presence was not did not exist back then, but this is what we started doing in 2021, and we really cared about helping more activists, building deep relationships, and strengthening the networks of solidarity that existed already before us, but we wanted a new generation of activists to be able to talk and speak in Arabic, not only communicate with the usual, most of the time men that speak Hebrew or English, but also the women and the children. And we brought groups, and we're still bringing groups to stay in Masafa Yatta in the South Hebron Hills for 3 months and be part of the communities, and also especially do protective presence. So that's how I got into this. And during the first 2 cohorts, I lived there with the group, so for 7 months in 2021. And I think what kept me going with this was first of all the fact that I felt that I'm part of a network, that I have deep relationships and friends that are now just part of my life, and I'm gonna continue going back there and visit if it's for activism, if it's just for visits. But I think in the last years, when things are becoming worse and worse here, and we're really facing probably the worst years that many of us ever saw. I think for me, it's also just an inspiration to be here. And there is a lot of despair in not doing anything. And a lot of times, like, hearing about what is going on the ground from afar is much harder, actually, than to be there and to see and be there with the people, experiencing things myself, with my friends, having like a spectrum of emotions around it. And I think the inspiration part comes from really every visit and every conversation, learning so much from the residents there that are doing these things that, like, for basically all their lives. And I feel because this conversation was supposed to be with Eid and about al-Khair, and I can tell a story about not so long ago, I think like a few months ago, when I stayed in al-Khair for the night, and they woke us up in the middle of the night because something weird was happening in the valley. And we went there, stood like just above the valley, and we saw the security guard of Carmel with a flashlight walking around.
Carmel is the nearby settlement, just to be.
Yes, thank you. And so this is a man that is well known in the community. Most of the troubles come from him. And after like half an hour, we understood that he's putting a fence in the middle of the valley. And the meaning of like the meaning of that fence was that in the next mornings, next morning, kids won't be able to pass this wadi and walk to the school. And we tried to call the police. The police did not arrive. They somehow arrived just 2 minutes after he was done and went back to the settlement. And we went back to sleep. And in the morning, we woke up, and the villagers, like the residents, they decided that even though there's a fence, we're gonna all like march with the kids, and we're gonna stand there next to the fence until they will remove it. And of course, we knew there is really no chance that they will remove it, but the leaders of the village decided that this is what we're gonna do, and that's what we did. We all walked. There were probably 40 kids, from like 6-year-olds to 14 or something, that walked crossed the valley, and for half a day we just stood there next to the fence and called the police, argued with the security personnel that were there, and the kids were just sitting there and waiting for the gate to be removed. After probably like 3 hours, 2 people, the security guard of Carmel and another soldier, came and threw tear gas grenades in order to disperse all the children. So for like after a few hours, suddenly, without any notice, like tear gas was shot, and all the kids just ran away and went back to the houses. And I think for us, for me at least, it felt like, okay, we did our thing. Like we demonstrated, the kids demonstrated, we got our photos to make an article about it. But the people in al-Khair decided for many days, I think like 20 days, that they are going to come back every morning and they're going to stay next to the fence, and the kids will open their books and they're going to have classes, and they're going to bring the Minister of Education of the PA and media people, and they're going to have a demonstration every day. Now, this was half a year ago, and I don't know if it's obvious, but there are no demonstrations in the West Bank for like probably the last, I don't know, Sarit, correct me if I'm wrong, but probably for many years. Like it is just too dangerous, it's too scary, and people are in such, like, it takes a lot to organize a community to demonstrate. And I think for me this is really the essence of al-Khair specifically, but also of the things that I learned there, in the ways of like how in some ways it's easier for me to feel the despair, and then like having this inspiration coming from there, and have more energies to come back the next time, and so I think that's why I'm coming back every time. And yeah.
Thank you, Maya. And I know, because I've spent so much time with you and with Roei, how many stories you have, and how each time you come to the West Bank and you stand in solidarity with the community, it's something different, something specific to the area, to the people, to the community. And your bravery and courage is inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. I want to encourage the audience to use the chat function, the Q&A function, and we want to leave a few minutes for questions. But I want to go from these stories from Roei and Maya, and I'm sorry we don't have more time to hear even more of them, to Sarit, back to Sarit, and listening to these stories, and they happen all the time on a daily basis. They're activists going into the West Bank. We know that protective presence is something. There are some, success stories, some minor success stories. I wouldn't say, we still have work to do, but it's not abstract. It's something real, and we're building it. So I want to ask you, as the need grows, how is the movement growing? What are the other organizations doing?
Yeah. So I think it's become very clear to a lot of Israelis who oppose the occupation that currently in this reality, there's like lots of avenues for action are not open to us any longer. Like in the past, we used to be able to maybe argue it out in the courts or with the government or with different branches, call the police, try and reach out to the army, lawyers calling the army legal advisors on behalf of a community or people petitioning the High Court. But slowly, but very surely, unfortunately, all of these avenues have closed off. That's not to say that there is no longer any opening for any legal work or for any police or military outreach. In fact, we do it all the time. Everyone calls the police and the army all the time when we're out on the ground, even though we know they're not going to help us, because the alternative is just to not call them. But I think it's obvious to everyone that that at the moment, we've reached such an extreme situation with, the Ben Gvir police basically not being under a directive to not enforce the law on Israeli settler terrorists. The army, unfortunately, supporting wholeheartedly the establishment of so-called settlement farms, and the government funding, basically pouring huge amounts of money into this entire effort. And also the High Court being even less willing to intervene on behalf of Palestinians, more than or less than the very minimal support that it gave in the past. And therefore, the only thing in a way that we have is us, people on the ground, using our privileges as Israelis, that we still do have, and standing by these Palestinian communities. And the notion that that's the way or the only remaining viable thing that could somehow still support Palestinians enough to allow them to stay on their land or stay in their homes, I think has led to the emergence and the expansion of many, many groups. And there are, dozens of groups, activists, individuals. Some operate within the framework of like more established human rights organizations. Others work either with their kind of like circle of friends or within kind of like activist groups. And they've pretty much divvied up the West Bank, or most of the West Bank, and especially the rural areas. And in virtually all areas, there is some presence of activists. Not in all areas, unfortunately. Like, for example, now the settlers are expanding into the northern West Bank, and it's very hard to get Israeli activists there because it's all Area A, and we would probably be arrested if we entered. Settlers aren't. But this is happening, and there's more and more people who are joining, I think, this course of action. And I think a lot of people are also understanding through their protective presence a lot about the reality for Palestinians, just like Roei and Maya described. They're learning a lot about the people in those communities. They're learning a lot about the occupation. Some people are kind of like really see the truth, in a sense, through this activism. And the NIF is certainly trying to encourage it, and has for 3 years now supported activists on many levels in terms of like anything material that people need, require, like a sort of an envelope. And now maybe we can talk about it in a moment, with really kind of like investing in even more of an expansion and a coordination of this activism.
Yeah. For instance, there are many questions in the chat, and I thank you all for your questions. But I think one that was just submitted and is relevant is, have legal actions been effective at all in opposing the outposts and the type of harassment? So maybe talking about the legal strategy which we're investing in, and how does that fit in?
Yeah, so as I said, over the last few years, with the changes in Israeli society, with the judicial overall, which is actually leading to even, as I said, even the minimal protections provided by courts for Palestinians, or the virtually non-existent protections, are now gone, essentially. There is also, I think, an attitude by the High Court of trying to really pick their battles and save the unpopular decisions for things that they would consider important, like the judicial overall and other anti-democratic legislation, rather than supporting Palestinians whose rights are being violated by the government. And this means that there are far fewer options for High Court petitions. I'll give one example. Every single High Court petition that has addressed a Palestinian community that was completely wiped out through this tool of settler violence has not succeeded, even though in some cases these petitions were accepted by the High Court. And this is because the authorities would then slowly either ignore or violate or minimally implement these decisions. There's virtually no a process now where you could actually force the authorities to implement court decisions. In fact, in al-Khair, there's a very clear case of a High Court a court interim injunction just being ignored, and then the court just giving up. So I think there are some interventions that we still do. There's also the question of the elections that we are going into in a few months in Israel, and some court processes hopefully could be potentially more effective after the elections. So we're still working on legal interventions and collecting information, and also collecting data. And this is something that activists on the ground are extremely supportive and very, very helpful with. And one of the things our project is doing here in the NIF is actually trying to coordinate further and investing more in this process of data collection. But some smaller legal interventions have had minor successes, like, for example, exclusion orders or orders that are issued by courts against violent settlers on the basis of information provided by the victims. So there are some small interventions that are successful, but overall, unfortunately, at the moment, we're dealing with a situation where much of this work, as I said, we have to do it because there is no other option. But we're doing it from a perspective that is very much about conserving the space for legal work and for other types of interventions until the possibility, which we hope and everyone is working for, of political change in Israel and in the United States.
Thank you, Sarit, for that answer, which really describes how the multi-pronged approach of the different organizations that we support and the work they do, how that is, we're trying to coordinate that into something larger. I want to give the tough question to Roei, but a question that we can't avoid, which is, what can, American Jews, what can they do? What is it that you can offer them from what you see from your experience into their actions?
So first of all, I think coming here to the Zoom is already doing. We in Israel, many times we feel like we are a minority, and every time I think I talk with the American audience, it gives us power because we understand we represent. I'm doing my work as a Jew, not despite my Judaism, but because of my Judaism. Therefore, every time I represent a bigger amount of Jews, it gives me power, and it makes me feel more and more. It gives me more power when I stand on the field. The second thing is that, at the end, we are the land on the ground here, and you are the land on the ground there in the States. And America the USA has tremendous power over the Israel policy. And it means that you have tremendous power over affecting what's happening here. And you have to use all your political privileges and power to stop the disaster, to stop the deportation. If it's pushing towards your congressman, or if it's pushing towards the other politician or journalist, wearing tension towards what's happening. And last, at the end we hear of volunteering, but I think any support who can come to also help the wider picture, and I think NIF are doing it greatly. At the end, I'm using my Jewish body, and it's the minimal usage of a Jewish privilege to stop the violence, but except of standing with my own body and bringing my friends to stand with their own bodies. After we'll, inshallah, change the government, there is plenty of work and deep work to do in order to fix what's happening in the state. And it's policy work, and it's media work, and it's groundwork, and supporting NIF. And the bigger picture is, I'm sure, is very, very helpful, because it's trying to solve the problem not from the how it appears on the ground, but also in the more rooted democracy structures that we are seeing that is affecting the West Bank.
Thank you, Roei. Thank you very much. And as we close, I want to just remind us of what we've learned and heard today. We wanted to hear from Eid, but we sadly couldn't. So we saw his video and we understood a bit more about his experience and what is happening at his village in al-Khair. We then understood that this is not only something specific, it's indicative of something much wider that is happening all over the West Bank. And then we heard from activists who represent a growing movement, and truly it is growing. And sadly, we didn't talk about it today, but it is growing immensely in the last couple of years, who do this kind of work of protective presence, of solidarity, of assisting Palestinians. And then we've seen how we, as an organization at NIF, are trying to coordinate all the actors in the field into something more cohesive and more impactful. So I think we started with something very dark and troubling, and we progressed through action, which gives hope and is the right thing to do. So I just want to spotlight that people refusing to stand by is so incredible in this time, and it's something that I encourage us all to take into our lives. The Israeli activists, the Palestinian communities, you coming to this online program, supporting NIF, in the chat, and also other places we've been talking about a program called Protect the Harvest, which I encourage you to check, which will bring people from all over the world to do protective presence or accompany protective presence people. And on behalf of everyone at the New Israel Fund, I want to thank the speakers we've had, Maya, Roei, and Sarit. I want to thank you all for sharing your experiences today, and I want to thank all the audience for coming to this online program, for caring about this work. And if you've been inspired, continue supporting and continue reading and coming to our online events. We hope to give you more and more of this, and I thank you deeply. So Maya, Roei, Sarit, Godspeed and good luck on behalf of all of us. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.